LLMs and chatbots become incredibly powerful, they still are need for structured prompting. Now, I know a lot of foundation model companies have said that you're not going to need prompt engineering anymore because models are going to have native reasoning and it's going to think through a chain of thought by default and it's going to produce better results. And that is true. A lot of these models now you can see their thinking process and it gives you an explanation of how it came to an answer, right? But there are still certain nuances in the way you do work as an advisor or as a finance professional that the model just is not going to think of, right? And so it's important for you to like always, when you give a model a task, depending on the sensitivity of the task, is to get the model to start thinking through a problem using a step-by-step approach. This has been proven over the last few years. And so I'm going to share 10 different techniques. I'm going to try to make this as quick and succinct as possible. But just remember that this is going to be very iterative and you're going to have to start practicing to see results. But I know for a fact that if you use some of these techniques and implement them properly, you can reduce your hallucination rates dramatically. You can increase the rate of your accuracy, and you can just get way better output just by structuring the prompts in the right way, because these models are really powerful. And by getting it to really focus on really narrow tasks, you can unlock all the intelligence and value that's locked up in these models. So I'll start off with the chain of thought prompting technique, right? So like I said earlier on, these models have native reasoning, but you might think through a problem in a different way that the model is just simply not going to think through it. So a simple prompt is say, work through the step by step in a way that I would work through this problem. Here are some different steps to work through it. And then you give it the different steps, right? State what you understand the task to be, list the variable and constraints that you want the model to think through, make it show its reasoning for each calculation and decision, identify any assumptions that it's making, present your conclusion with a confidence level. I think that's critical, right? Getting the model to present its own confidence level. And we'll touch on, why this is important, other techniques too. But chain of thought is really essentially getting a model to think through it, think through a problem step by step, using your firm's, own thinking process about a specific workflow. So for example, think about a ROT conversion analysis, right? Or timing for Social Security withdrawals, or retirement projections. Any recommendation that you'll need to explain or defend to a client, you want the model to really think through it step by step and produce like clear trace of reasoning for it. Okay. So the next one is chain of verification. And I love this technique because it forces the model to ask questions about its own output and verify its own responses. And so before finalizing, let's just start with the problem, right? AI confidently keeps presenting information that sounds right, but isn't grounded in anything. I think we've all been through that. We all know exactly what I mean when I say that, right? It confidently presents information. And so this technique was, first introduced by Meta, and I've been using it for the last year and a half. But Meta research found that this technique reduced hallucination rates by 77%, right? So before finalizing, this is how it works. Before finalizing, this is like an actual prompt. Before finalizing, generate 3 to 5 fact check questions for your output. Answer each question using my source documents. Mark anything you can't verify as unverified and show me the verification results. Now, if it's not using your data, you can say, verify, answer using the web sources or the document sources that you're, citing in this response, and verify it for me, right? It's really as simple as you could even like summarize that prompt that I just read out. And you could summarize that prompt and even say something like, use a chain of verification approach to verify these answers that you just gave me. And it will know exactly what you mean and it'll kick off that prompting technique, right? So a verification loop is also another keyword that you could use. Run a chain of verification loop. That actually gets the model to work through a loop until it's verified all the data points that it's mentioned in the output. And it gets it to verify itself, right? You can get the model to also list sources for each verified claim at the end. Okay, so the next one is groundedness validation, right? This is getting a model to stay on task. Now, if you're using a chatbot or if you use AI, you know that if you stay in a chat thread long enough and if you're focused on one task at the top when you start the prompt, when you start the session, and you come down to like 15 or 16 or 20 different interactions, you can start feeling that the model's drifting a little bit, right? It's not giving you the exact responses based off your initial prompt. We've all experienced that. We continue to experience that. It's because of in-context learning, because of short-term memory within these chat threads. It's not able to glean context across the entire chain, across the entire thread. It is getting incredibly better, but if you're running like a data sensitive, like a sensitive task, like maybe if you know how to use these models correctly, maybe even within your secure firm environment, hopefully you have a great AI model that you could use. um, this could happen even there, right? But I just wanted to mention that because if you're like, for example, parsing like a client's investment documents, tax estate planning documents, and you're trying to glean context across all those documents, sometimes you can't just depend on the AI's response when you ask it to summarize it or get an insight from a specific document or try to pull like holistic context across those documents. You may not be able to trust everything that it's telling you. And so running like a groundedness validation prompt can be extremely useful. So here's an example of how it would look. Review this entire conversation and classify each claim in your last response as grounded, inference, or ungrounded based on the data I originally provided. Flag anything that drifted from my initial task. And so if it's flagged anything that's drifted from your original task, you can always re-upload those documents and say, okay, here's the fresh documents again. Run a check and make sure you add a groundedness test across all these documents, right? You want the AI to be as grounded in your data as possible. So, that's an ideal way for you to prove that the model's responses can actually be trusted. Okay, so the next technique is constitutional constraints. And constitutional constraints is basically for marketing or any kind of content that's client facing or marketing communications related, right? So the problem is that you're generating client facing content, and you need compliance baked in from the start, not as an afterthought. And I have some experience in this because when I built AdvisorX, which is a startup I built before, we focus a lot on AI marketing, content generation, and getting compliance to be baked in right from that first initial chat conversation, right? And so you can do this now inside chatbots pretty easily. You can even bake them into memory. Like one simple hack here, like talking about constitutional constraints. Constitutional AI was essentially invented from, it's a prompting technique that Anthropic introduced. And the whole premise of the framework is to give the AI a framework to operate within, right? And so you could tell the AI, I'm an SEC registered advisor. You need to always comply with SEC marketing compliance when you produce any kind of marketing content or client communications content. Remember this in your memory. And then ChatGPT will immediately remember it in memory. Claude will immediately remember it in memory because, and that's something it will always refer to when it creates the final output. So constitutional constraints is super useful, right? Um, like I said, it's really giving the AI a framework for how to create content. In this use case, it's marketing content related, right? Okay. So next, we're going to focus on source attribution scaffolding. I really love this technique because when it comes to like document retrieval or any kind of like data retrieval task, you want the AI to be able to attribute the source that it got the information from, right? Just showing the citation next to the text it's fine. But sometimes maybe you just need something a little bit more. Talking about like auditable work, verifiable work, this is something can be really useful. So here's an example of a short prompt. And by the way, like all these prompts are in the link in the description on this video. You can click on the link in the description and head to my LinkedIn newsletter, Wealth Management Prompts, and subscribe. And you can also see all these prompts out there so you can test it within your own workflow. So here's an example of a prompt. Format every factual claim as claim, source in parentheses document name, and preface anything you can't attribute with general knowledge or I infer, right? So what you're doing is you're really trying to get the AI to format every factual claim. If it cannot attribute a source, then it needs to preface it with general knowledge and note that this is not from provided documents. So you can run a chain of verification on any of that information. And if it's inferring anything based on a specific, you can ask the AI to also explain what it's inferring from. Maybe it's a specific data point, because it can use a data point and infer something out of that, which you may not want it to infer, right? And then at the end, create a reference list of all sources cited. Okay, so the other technique, I'm trying to run through these techniques because it's a lot. Maybe I'll do a deep dive into one of these techniques, but multi-hop retrieval. I love this technique because it gets multi-hop retrieval essentially is getting an AI to run a review or really a traversal of all the documents you've given it within the chatbot or within an AI assistant, right? Maybe you have like 10 documents in it, right? Maybe it needs to like pull information similar to the groundedness check, but with multi-hop retrieval, you're forcing complete holistic document retrieval across all those different documents, and then creating a synthesis of the information that's found, and it's being produced to you. So the problem is that, like I shared with the groundedness use case too, clients share documents across multiple conversations, right? You have your tax returns, statements, insurance policies, you need a unified picture. But AI tends to cherry pick from whatever it saw most recently. So always remember that. If you give you estate planning documents first, if you give you like financial planning, now I know a lot of advisors aren't doing this yet with AI or with chatbots. Maybe some of you are actually doing it. If you're doing it, just make sure that you have your data security and model training turned off within your chatbot environments. And yes, you can definitely do that. And also to disclose, enterprise subscriptions get way better. You get zero data retention essentially on enterprise subscriptions when you're working with OpenAI or Anthropic, and that's something that the company I'm with now is working on as well. Like, we are building agents on top of Palant's data infrastructure, and so we're really integrating AI safely. So yes, you can check my website too, jonathan-michael.com, and you can see more about what I'm doing, about content I've previously produced, but also the company that I'm now with is building the best agents you can think of on top of the most safest infrastructure you can think of. So multi-hop retrieval is really important, again, because it gives you a unique picture, a unified picture, and also cross-references all documents that you've shared, right? That is the key. That is multi-hop, is, as the name suggests, it's running, a loop or a traversal across these documents and trying to synthesize and show a structured summary at the end, right? Okay. So the next technique is critique, then revise, right? Could also be called reflect and refine. But getting AI to reflect on its own answers and refine its own output can dramatically improve the output, right? So let's look at some research here around it. Research shows that this delivers 80 to 95% of possible improvement in just 1 or 2 revision cycles. That is a massive leap. And so reflect and refine is a really important prompting technique, because if you think about it, critiquing any kind of AI output, you've got to use multiple perspectives here. So you've got the client's perspective. You want to critique the AI's output from your target client's perspective, or the client you're serving right now. You've got to critique it from the compliance perspective. Then you have the advisor perspective. And so you have these 3 different critiques that you can get the model to think through and refine its output, so that what it produces at the end is perfectly in line with what you need for your firm. It's not just considering your writing style. It's not just considering your compliance rules and guidelines, and those are all important. But it's also considering your client perspective. Again, for a marketing content use case, this is really useful. So it's also considering your client perspective, the advisor's perspective into it, and also a compliance perspective. And so self-reflect and refine is really useful to force the model to refine its own output and to critique its own output. So similar to chain of verification, but self-reflect and refine is forces internal reasoning. And so I really love that technique because of its ability to do that. Anytime you get AI to rethink its own output, to verify its own output through structured prompts, you're always going to get better output. All right. So the last three are this is something that I've generated on my own, for my own work as well, but it's called domain expertise priming. And the reason why I like this technique is because when I'm starting off a task, let's assume that I want to create, a blog on retrieval augmented generation, right? Which is essentially retrieving information from documents, data, web search, whatever, right? Now, when I start my initial chat thread, what I want to say is I want to ask a question like, do you have domain expertise on retrieval augmented generation? I'm trying to leverage a model's ability to use in-context learning to generate a really valuable output. In-context learning is something as simple as an AI that's learning in a chat thread. It is understanding your requests and it's customizing its responses based on your request, right? So it's getting really focused around your request. So that's why when you want to run another task, it's best to always open a new chat thread and to run a new task in a new chat thread. Anyways, domain expertise priming really helps you also to test if the model really has capabilities in your area of domain or expertise, right? In the area of domain or expertise that you wanted to have expertise in. So, for example, here's an example of a prompt that's more relevant for advisors. Before proceeding, prove your expertise in estate planning for high net worth individuals by defining 5 advanced concepts, explaining a common practitioner mistake, and citing the relevant regulatory framework. Now, this is a prompt that really is going to help you as a domain expert understand that AI can actually perform the task that you wanted to perform in. And another hack here is once you throw a prompt in like this, force it to think like you are the number one domain expert when it comes to estate planning and high net worth individuals. Can you develop a reasoning framework that enables you to produce output in such a way? Now, again, like you're using this domain experts priming framework, but you're also giving it a persona. Now you're really getting it primed up to produce really good output. And so that's when you provide the actual task. You don't want to just throw off the task right off the bat. Try to prime a chat thread and give a task once you've primed it a little bit more. All right. And the other one is so just 2 more. Okay, we're going to be done with just 2 more techniques, and I'd love to get feedback on this video because I really want to go really deep in some of these techniques, especially when it comes to reducing hallucination rates with data retrieval and document retrieval, which is basically the same thing. But some of you are probably using web search for getting information on stock or earnings calls or whatever, and you want to present market commentary to your clients. That's a great use case for that. But anyway, self-consistency validation, right? So what this means is financial calculations can have have right answers. If the AI makes an error, you need to catch it before the client sees it, right? So here's an example of a prompt. You can solve this calculation using 2 different ways. Compare the results, and if they differ, explain which method is more appropriate for this scenario. Self-consistency really leverages parallelization. What this means is you can give an AI a task and it can run several tasks in parallel and then synthesize those results and give you a response. You can also do this with multiple LLMs. And so to ensure that the model is self-consistent, you can use a prompt inside Gemini, Claude, ChatGPT, use multiple models. Maybe it's a critical task, like maybe you want to write a white paper in estate planning for high net worth individuals, right? That's customized to the delivery mechanism that your firm has. You can throw this prompt into different models and then compare all those results. Have a master LLM, maybe ChatGPT. So let's use an actual example, right? Maybe you throw a prompt into Gemini, Claude, and Perplexity, and you take all those responses, throw it into ChatGPT, and say synthesize these results for me, and verify all the information provided. That forces the model, that forces your workflow, I would say, to be self-consistent because you're using several model providers. You're running tasks in parallel, and then you're synthesizing those results, right? And so you can use this for like I said, like tax. I didn't mention this, but tax liability estimates, insurance needs analysis, Social Security optimization, RMD calculations, and research has shown that this technique improved accuracy by 17.9% in math problems. So definitely worth looking into. And finally, step back prompting, right? So think of step back prompting as getting the model to think through problems from first principles. So the AI might know the rule, but not the principle behind it. So these are systems that are really predicting the next best word based on training data, right? So it might have all the knowledge stored in, and sometimes, well, the magic of models is that it's able to synthesize and it's able to like form patterns across data sets and give you like a clear response. It's able to understand the way a model actually works. It's able to understand complex concepts, right? Um, but step back prompting forces it to think through a problem from first principles. So here's an example of a prompt. And by doing this, you're really testing the model. You want it to provide a response that makes sure, so you're sure that it understands the underlying principles. So before answering, here's an example prompt. Before answering, step back and identify the underlying regulatory principle, what harm it prevents, and how regulators typically interpret similar situations, then apply that analysis to my question. So this principle-driven approach can be really useful when you want the model. You want to make sure that the LLM and the AI chatbot that you're using really understands the concepts that you are trying to communicate but it could be a client communications use case, it could be an internal productivity use case, but I think that this is really helpful because here's an example. Here's another example. I'll just break down this prompt into a more enhanced version, right? So this is the actual prompt. Before answering this compliance question, step back and identify the underlying regulatory principle at play. What harm is this regulation designed to prevent? How have regulators historically interpreted similar situations? That forces web search and to look at case studies, reports, blogs on similar situations. What would a conservative interpretation look like versus an aggressive one? Now apply that principled analysis to my specific scenario and recommend the appropriate approach with your reasoning. This can do a lot of good for sensitive, complex use cases like compliance reviews, right? Maybe you want to review a white paper that I just referred to, like the estate planning white paper for high net worth individuals. Now you want to make sure that when it's writing content on estate planning for high net worth individuals, you want to make sure that all the information is accurate and correct. And by forcing the model to like give an explanation about regulation, I'll look at case studies, I'll look at situations where regulators have historically interpreted a specific clause differently. Being able to look at all those different nuances and then give you a response back, I mean, that's going to really improve the quality of the content that you create with AI. So just remember that you have all these different principles, and sometimes if it's just over your head, if it's too much, a simple hack, which I often use even with AI, is to give it the prompting technique and get it to figure it out too. Like, be self-consistent. Make sure that your response is self-consistent, refine and reflect, right? Those simple keywords can also improve the output of your AI systems. So you don't have to know everything that I shared here. And if you want to know more, you can click on the link in the newsletter in the description, and you can see all the content outlaid in the newsletter. So I hope you enjoyed watching this video if you watched the entire video so far. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel here. I will keep producing content to help advisors adopt AI at scale and do it in a way that's safe and compliant and regulated. And so auditable and verifiable too. I think that's what everyone is interested now in AI. It's like everybody knows about the gains that can be gotten from AI, but then being able to do it in a way that's compliant and auditable is key. So thank you for watching, and please subscribe.